Hello. Welcome again, Matt. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very excited to interview you. People will see, because today's a historic bill passed the Virginia state legislature at the House level.
Yes.
And Matt works for, what's the name of your state senator?
His name is Dave Marsden.
Dave Marsden, who was co-patron of a bill to promote renewable energy and the phasing out of coal plants. And this new bill that's just passed is an even more aggressive version of that bill, which involves phasing out coal plants in Virginia by 2030 and having 100% state electricity sources be renewable by 2050. Yes. So Matt can tell us some more about how this came to be and how you have various state attorneys working on the bill, but your boss and your efforts have been devoted towards pushing this legislation and pushing for action on this front. So tell me more.
So it goes back to maybe at least 1 year back. As always, to be able to get something done, you actually have to have the requisite numbers once you get down to the legislature, because there's only so much real lobbying you can do once the legislators have arrived in town or they're there. They got elected to, many of them got elected to make sure you don't do what you want to do.
Yes.
And so since 1992, this is the first time that Democrats have controlled the state legislature, both houses of the state legislature and the governor's mansion. So we have complete control of the state government now. To become a majority party, not everyone is of the same mind on every issue. And so we won the House, the Senate, and we had already won the governor's mansion 2 years earlier. And so we knew that there were going to be a variety of different things that we wanted to do in terms of climate. And this bill is not the end all be all of what we are going to have accomplished this year.
It's a baby step on the pathway. Oh, no, it's just one of the things, one of your legislative goals.
Yes.
Now you have the Senate and the House and the governorship.
Yes. And so there are other bills that will do other things, like joining the regional greenhouse emissions group that will allow us to join in with our emissions and set standards for that. But the bill that we put in was less aggressive than the one that has now passed. And I was explaining to you earlier slightly that the process of writing the bills, it wasn't like I sat down myself and wrote down, this is a huge bill, so it's probably 30 pages of code. What we do is, in the off season before we get down to session, is we'll have an idea. You need to send at least a few sentences, so the legislative attorneys can understand what you actually want to get done. And so essentially we sent in the idea that we wanted to, by 2030, get to, I believe it was 40% renewable energy sources, and then moving up 3% more every year. So at that point you would be at 70 by 2040, and then you would also be at 100% by 2050, which is the goal. Scientists are saying that we need to do even more.
Yes, which is why I think of this as baby steps, because it's about building consensus. And when people get something done and the world doesn't end, they go, oh, yeah, renewable energies don't have all the negative outcomes that people on the right often predict, and go, no. Like Trump says, if you depend on wind energy, you're going to be watching television and there'll be a lull in the wind and then you won't have any electricity. It's not like that. People sometimes need to come to grips with the realities of renewable energy. Time and technological improvements are helping them do that. But legislative wins are what drives it forward in a very concrete. Then they go, okay, yep, we're doing this now. Let's move on to the next thing we can do.
Absolutely. And it's, we are going to have to do a lot of things. And the biggest lie and the worst kind of lie is that Trump is playing on people's ignorance and unfortunately, it's not ignorance. People aren't always unintelligent, but people haven't been taught, and people don't really, a lot of folks haven't had the opportunity to really understand the world outside of them. And so throughout, the whole Obama presidency, Republicans, and then Trump capitalized on it, lied to people and was saying that Obama was killing coal single-handedly. Yes, coal. He set, CO2 emission standards that were good policy for the United States and for the world. But liquefied natural gas is what killed coal. It's so much cheaper, and it actually does emit less. It's still not good, but
it's a baby step. It's a baby step, but it helps people break that mindset of coal is required to have the working class be happy. And it's not. There are still jobs available. Coal is a dying industry, not just because it's being superseded by gas and other technologies, but also people are getting their investment funds pulled out of coal because particularly young people with money want a viable future. So it's becoming the case that more people understand the problems with unrestrained greenhouse gas emissions.
I hadn't heard of what you just mentioned until a couple of weeks ago, the people pulling divesting their funds if you're invested in coal.
Yeah, and that's such a good example of consumer power really pushing forward a pro-social, pro-humanity agenda. That by telling your super managed funds or your superannuation, I'm changing companies if you keep supporting fossil fuel industries, that's happening now at a sufficiently broad level that BlackRock is saying, yep, we're divesting from fossil fuels. Jim Cramer, my husband said he's an idiot. I'm not into stocks, but he said a lot of people do listen to him. And he was saying, he doesn't see a future in investing in fossil fuels anymore because it's become like tobacco. There is a stench associated with it, and people are pulling away, and that trajectory is significant enough that more people will have to do it as well. More people will have to divest from fossil fuels just purely out of financial interest, even if they're not entirely on board with paying attention to science.
That's exactly the kind of meeting of the interests, because at the same time, even if you don't care, if you're somehow of the mind that climate change isn't real or we can reverse it at some point, it's also just the pure economics of it are that this is a dying industry, and I don't want my money to be caught up with a dying industry.
I don't want my money to be poisoning the lungs of my children and poisoning the hopes of my children and the food supplies of my children and et cetera. It's like a point of critical mass of educated people. It's like we create the trend and then we ride the trend. So by spreading science, we help create the trend of enough informed people to be making a significant economic impact by requesting that their funds be managed differently.
I think this is what's so exciting about this bill is my favorite part about it is I think the most important thing we need to start doing, two very important, but this gets one of them done. One of the most important things is we need to move into the trend of more solar panels on your homes, as opposed to, thinking that they're going to be so far out in some field somewhere and they store the energy, then they push your power out to you. That is the way our minds have worked to think about how power generation works. But if people started buying into these companies and creating tiles that, for most of the time, while you're away at work, you can turn off your power. So you can be storing up power. So it raised the maximum net metering percentage from 1%, which we have a monopoly in Virginia that does our energy stuff. And that's quite that's a completely different conversation. But they've been able to enshrine into law a 1% net meter, 1% solar generation portfolio that you were allowed to have, essentially.
Okay. Solar generation portfolio that you're allowed to have, and you can derive money from generating electricity to feed.
So you can sell it back into the grid. That's the interesting thing. And so you're going to have conservatives who like it because it can make the money, and then you can have the liberals and the independents feel like I'm saving my kids' lungs, like you were just speaking to. But some people don't speak that language.
No, some people speak the language of the purse, and when we build consensus, I'm trying to get more people like me, who are the more emotive, creative types, to speak in the language of the purse as well. To say it's in your children's interests to have the ability to make money. Like, conservatives typically want to conserve the status quo, but they also think that will work for their children. They don't accept science. So understanding that there are economic trajectories here that will hurt your purse in the future and the purse of your children. Even if they can't go big picture enough to say, hey, even your children's access to food is threatened by climate change developments. Even agricultural systems are threatened by temperature increases.
This is it's a fascinating topic. It's frustrating because it just seemed the science and everything seems so overwhelming and so easy to understand. Frustrating to have, but
I remember 20 years ago, there was a meeting of psychologists and interested parties called Why is Change So Hard? And they were talking about climate change. And I was at high school then, and so it's a considerable amount of time ago. So I think maybe we didn't come to an adequate reckoning of, it's not just change is hard. There were significant forces arranged against the science and against people sharing that science. Somebody's just done a report about it. I know I clicked retweet on a post. What did I do with that post? I'll have to scroll through my own Twitter feed to get it. But some organization has done a considerable amount of research in exactly where people invested money and the institutions that took money from fossil fuel executives to actively undermine scientists, to actively undermine people trying to work to better humanity. That's
like tobacco.
Yeah, like tobacco, except with so much broader consequences. And it's not just people who smoke. So many uninvolved people suffer as a consequence. You don't have to be actively smoking a cigarette in the way that you don't actively have to be smoking fossil fuels, although we do all use fossil fuels.
Yes.
But people in countries where they have not much access to fossil fuels even are also suffering from mass flooding and the depredations of climate change, with even less ability to defend themselves against it.
So I think automation will be dangerous in other economic senses, which is why I think Andrew Yang's idea of a basic income has some merit. I don't think it would be politically popular at the moment, but I was getting at in terms of automation. So if you took all of the space in Los Angeles that is devoted towards parking, you could fit, I think they said, 3 San Franciscos inside of it. And as we move towards self-driving cars, and interesting video that I watched talked about how in 10 years, they say in 2030, there's going to be 2/3 of the market that's devoted, that's not going to be driving the way we drive now. There'll be cars that pick you up from where you want to go. If you want to go,
like a share car that just picks you up and you get into it and it drops you off, like more of a public transport system.
But it'll be a little fancier and more private than that.
Yeah,
you'll probably
more
want
containable units, private unit, public transport system. So it's public in that it's people get in and out of the car more than yourself, but it's still just you riding in a unit at a time, one car that you get in and get out.
And what we should do is Once we get to that point, we're talking mid 2030s. We should use a lot of that parking area and devote it towards replanting trees.
Planting trees, yeah.
Because talk about how in Australia you guys have been burning massive forest fires, have taken out the trees. We've got to get them back.
Yes. We do. We've got to get the lungs of the earth to be functioning at full capacity. Shall we chat a little bit about, I think last time we were getting into some interesting stuff about corporate welfare, and we were using analogies to say there's a pillow out, taxpayer funded pillow out for the risks that corporations take in terms of their freedom from paying tax on their profits, so they can keep their profits to cushion them for hard times, so they can take risks essentially at the expense of the public. And they also, what are some of the other cushions that are there for a corporate pillow for risk in the private sector?
Tons, including the Trump tax cuts, and other tax cuts in the past have had they've had tax write-offs for private jets. In Virginia, we have a tax credit for coal plants. Now we just use it for coal that's being used to make steel, but we used to prop up dying industries.
What are they called again? Rebates for the making coal into steel.
It's coal tax credit for metallurgical coal.
I'm typing this down so I remember. Coal tax credit. My typing is not very good.
And Virginia spends millions of dollars a year on it, and I'm sure other states do as well.
Yeah.
Because
I think that's something
socialism for the rich. We already have lots of socialism in this country and others.
Yeah, corporate socialism. I'm trying to find the most evocative way to describe it that helps break through some of that narrative that people often have in the US, which is that pull yourself up by your bootstraps, don't offer welfare to people, but they don't realize how much welfare is being offered to corporations and offered and accepted to corporations. And if they understood the drain on the public purse that is, maybe they'd be a little bit more moved to stop indulging governments that want to hand out corporations. That's not libertarianism. That's just making rich people have so much more of a safety net, publicly funded safety net, than people who are not wealthy because of some unfortunate attribution of virtue to wealth and lack of virtue to not wealth.
Yeah.
And I don't have a focus group to pay for to say what resonates best with you. So I just try it out by talking to you and then seeing and asking people, what jumps out at you people? Tell us.
So it's frustrating because we've been taught so much, or the way people colloquially understand tax cuts is a tax raise on one group is a tax raise on everybody. And it's been conflated. And also another misnomer about American taxation is prior to the mid 70s, definitely the Reagan era, it was normal for top effective tax rates to be 50, 60, 70%. It's only in the last 40 years where you have the Reagan Revolution, and we get this kind of new dogma about what American taxation is. This is un-American. These are the things and the programs and the way of thinking that created the American middle class that started to die off right when this kind of ridiculous, pro-corporate, pro-wealthy, keeping all of the pot thoughts about taxation really took hold, and it's been damaging the country. I mean, we have roads and bridges and schools
in complete disrepair. Yeah, I've heard that before, that it's been a trajectory for America since Reagan. And yes, someone was making the point that this is not limited to Trump, and I would completely agree. Trump is in a large part a product of people buying into those stories, those damaging stories where Republicans were able to invite people to conflate those two, to say, oh, don't tolerate a tax on the rich. That means you're all taxed. Because you're all wealthy in your head, so you are the wealthy. If we say taxing the wealthy, that means taxing all of you, because you all want to be wealthy, right? Right. So this overselling of the American dream, so that too many people self-identify as wealthy because they're aspirationally wealthy, which has undermined the American middle class and just cut away access to achieving the American dream, because it's meant the burden of taxation falls on the middle class, specifically because Americans have been taught to fear high tax rates on the wealthy. So you taught to over-identify with the wealthy means you oppose tax rates on the wealthy, which actually means, as the middle class, you get taxed more yourself, because you then have to bear more of the burden for having functioning bridges, and they function less and less over time. You have to pay more for a product that is decreasing in quality. The more you buy into that lie that the wealthy should be treated nicely because you all want to be wealthy. And when I say nicely, I mean so incredibly indulgently, treating the wealthy so indulgently that you let them have all of those private jets and hey, nani. Have you seen Matt? Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to ask if you'd seen that footage of a preacher who was asked by a journalist about a private jet that he bought from Tyler Perry. And he was saying, oh, I need it. I need that private jet. You don't want me to get all distracted while I'm writing my sermons. And she said, yes, but you said that there are demons in metal tubes. Are you calling people demons? And he's like, oh, not the people, darling. The alcohol. It makes them do things. And yeah, and he was just defending his use of a private jet and his purchase of a private jet. So it's quite a creepy little viral video. And I would like it to be shown every day, just to remember the rationalizations that the very wealthy can project around themselves, whether it be religious craziness or just, hey, I can, so I will.
Incredibly frustrating. But they're going to lose. I think people have to remain vigilant and frustrated and pissed off, and understand that the system is rigged and people want to rig it, keep it rigged, and rig it even more. And you can see that tied in with the white collar treatment of Trump's friends, all caught up in the same kind of privilege and understanding that, certain people, it's okay if they, if we make things unfair for them. That's okay unfairness. Yes.
Well, that's active obstruction of justice and criminal facilitation, because Roger Stone, 9 felony counts was convicted of, and they just trumps anybody who helped Trump with his crimes to obstruct justice, to conceal the collusion with Russia. I mean, that's what Roger Stone's guilty of, essentially, is hiding collusion with Russia, hiding the fact that, and so hiding the fact that America is still governed by someone who is beholden to a foreign adversarial leader. And because Trump wants to be Putin, effectively. Putin is one of the richest fossil fuel executives in the world. And Trump would like to be that also. So he emulates the same sham democracy principles, where you get your friends out of jail, they commit crimes to protect you, and you commit crimes. And a big pattern of concealment and dysfunction is being acted out on a day-to-day basis right now. And it's so interesting how I always hope that more and more independents, people who don't just limit their news consumption to Fox News, will be able to register the gravity of this moment for you all and jump on a blue train. But
I think that they are. I do largely think that they are, and partially because I live it, and I if there's a new poll, I've seen it, and and my Twitter followers have seen it.
yes,
So
yes.
I look into the cross tabulations and in terms of how different groups are responding to different messages, and I think that they are. The only frustration is that you only get one election day a year, so you've got to push all that energy towards that desired end. The desired end can't just be public sentiment in February. You have to have that translate into people voting and getting other people to vote and knocking on doors and all kinds of stuff that's involved in winning.
Well, the good thing Democrats are really fired up because the degree to which they not just disapprove of Trump, but strongly disapprove of Trump and think he should be ousted. That's so high that I think there will be high turnout at the polls. And hopefully people are able to coalesce around a candidate. It's so interesting watching these negotiations over a candidate, but I hope that there'll be at least more representative primary races soon, because we're just getting info from white voters in Iowa and New Hampshire, and I want to see who the majority of black voters are going to settle on as a powerful candidate. What's your?
I think there's a larger than people recognize chance that the Democratic nominee is none of these people.
Oh, interesting.
Because if they all stay in it, for a while, the delegates could be split up in a way. If only five of them stay in for a certain period, no one's going to get to that required delegate number. And then
what happens?
Sorry, what were you saying?
Then what happens if there's no one with the required majority of delegates? What happens? What happens next in the primary system?
So you remember the 2016 Democratic convention. So parties have the conventions, and it's more kind of like a coronation thing these days, but it's originally set up for you to finally, that's why when you get there, you'll have certain delegates from certain states. And so you'll be standing there with a poll and it'll say,
oh, and you move around. Do you move around and stand with who you support, and then people drop out and you move towards a new?
Well, that's a caucus. This could be, yes, you could, I guess you're right in a way that it could be done that way. And if no one comes to the convention with the requisite amount of delegates, it hasn't been seen in 50 years, 60 years. So it'd be interesting how it happens in real time with Twitter and TV. It would be, but I think it would maybe be beneficial. I think both ends of the party would then be forced to find someone who is the person, but they would have to then work it out like that somebody who did run has to be the vice president or something. It just creates so many interesting dynamics, but it's way more of a chance than people give it credit for.
Okay. Yeah, because people keep crowning Bernie the winner, even though he's lost so much support in Iowa and New Hampshire since the last time he ran. Like thousands less people are voting for Bernie now. And I'm with the team of people that say, yeah, to me, there's a problem that you don't attract enough independent voters in battleground states. And people get really caught up in, the polls which say Trump can be defeated by any Democratic candidate at this point, but that's in the popular vote. And I'm still saying, hey, I haven't forgotten 2016 and what Russian help can do in tweaking support and pulling away support from a Democratic nominee in key battleground states, making people, like psychographic targeting of people who are a little bit psychologically unstable or who score highly on neuroticism, and then they flood them with highly tuned propaganda to make them vote a third party or something. I don't want that to happen again. So I'm keen on getting a reasonably centrist candidate. I mean, Hillary Clinton was a fairly centrist candidate, and she still was subject to that propaganda campaign in a way that was very successful in robbing someone of the candidacy of the presidency. But
that's what frightens me. I think about I think the whole Trump presidency has radicalized Americans that don't like Donald Trump, and watching them steal a Supreme Court justice from Trump or from Obama, accept Russian help blatantly during the election, cover it up during the election, and I'm talking about Mitch McConnell covering it up, accepting that Trump continued to do it throughout, and then watching him say that he's okay with Putin, he believes Putin. All these people and all of this that's going on, I just find it really hard to accept or believe that anyone who's still thinking about voting for Donald Trump is voting for Donald Trump. And I think to beat Donald Trump, you have to find somebody who is going to equally excite Democrats. Like the people who, there are no fence sitters right now. Anybody who's sitting on the fence is voting for Donald Trump. in my eyes.
But there's so many. There's like 46% of the electorate that didn't vote before. So
Yes.
I've heard that what's-her-face, the guy with the beard who ran the digital campaign, who's done Trump's campaign digital, Brad Pascal, that's the dude, that he's trying to switch on people who haven't voted already to make them vote for Trump. So that we should also have a campaign to turn out non-voters as well, with that whole urgency of vote or Trump will ride this economy into a ditch.
Yep.
So not just with our value system, but with a value system that appeals to economically disenfranchised people who are presumably the target. Because I hear that a big predictor of voting is having parents who vote. So I'm going to presume that a lot of those people who don't vote are relatively economically disenfranchised, although I don't know. Maybe they're middle-class non-voters who just don't feel concerned enough to vote.
It's our culture around voting is bad in America. And it's there are factors, but there's a general, before Donald Trump, I would say post-Trump, most people are politically engaged. It's not, 70, 80%, but you're very, like, I would say around 53, 54% of people talk about Donald Trump every day in one way or the other, mostly that don't like him. And I think we just got to realize, of course, we should have someone who can appeal to independents. I don't think that we need to worry about appealing to Republicans, because people who are still identifying as Republicans today, there are people who say that they voted for Mitt Romney and are former Republicans, or people who voted in 2014 for the GOP. And that's fine, whatever. We can discuss, taxation rates and your beliefs on marriage and abortion. But if you truly believe that Donald Trump is an existential threat to the United States, it's those people's responsibility to say, even if I ideologically disagree with the Democrat, I'm going to go and vote for the Democrat. Because at the end of the day, if it's about an ideological purity test, then we would basically have to run Jeb Bush for us to bring to, or we got to run Marco Rubio.
Rachel Whitekofer is a political analyst who describes this beautifully, and she says hyper negative partisanship turns out the vote. So Democrats who feel robbed from turn out, and that's what wins elections. You might hear talk of Republicans who have switched, or never Trumpers who will vote Democrat, but it's still hard for them to bring themselves to vote for a Democratic candidate, regardless of who it is. So talking about easing that pain for them is less critical than it is to just facilitate the base turning out. But as you say, that the base is already pretty hyped up to turn out, and they understand that Trump is an existential threat to democracy, but also to them individually, in terms of he'll just dump shit in your water and in your air. He will absolutely sell out the interests of the lower class, the middle class, and even the wealthy class, who are just too stupid to realize that they still have to breathe air and drink water. Some of them are really stupid. Some of them are like, oh, we'll just buy land in New Zealand and everything will be fine there. New Zealand will not save you from apocalypse. It's still on Earth, yeah. And if India and Pakistan start, lobbying nuclear weapons at each other, or, global hostilities turn bad, everybody will ultimately get affected. You can't buy your way out of this. It makes me so much more sympathetic to Jesus trying to get through to people that wealth is something that can corrupt your conscience and stop you from actually being able to even engage with reality if you think you can buy your way out of anything. It's true up to a point. And I'm not talking about buying your way out of heaven or hell, because I don't buy into those conceptual structures so much, but I can see how they are important social incentives. At least historically they were. Now it's, people live more a little bit in their heads in the present, and you can tell them, hey, everybody, Trump is coming for your water and your food and your air. And I think a lot of Americans now sign up to the idea that climate change is a problem, but still not a lot of Republicans. So yes, I think my ultimate point is that I agree with you. Getting Republicans to change their mind should be less of a consideration than supporting Democrats.
It's just, because the people of that mind are they're really not going to, they've watched this man for 3 years now. He hasn't fooled he's not trying to, he lies a lot, but he's really not trying to fool anybody. He's clearly, he believes in American oligarchy. He wants to get rid of Medicare, Medicaid.
It's feudalism. Serfdom for everybody. Terrible working conditions for so many people that you're all effectively trapped. And super happy fun time pillows for corporations and the ultra wealthy.
And this idea that we can, we'll be able to pull them in if we just nominate somebody that they disagree with, they don't disagree with too much. It's like, do you not disagree? Like, a lot of people compare, like they say Bernie Sanders is too far. And I voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. I haven't ever voted for Bernie Sanders. But even if I was a conservative Republican and I watched Donald Trump at the same time, Bernie Sanders is not going to hand over the reins to American foreign policy to Vladimir Putin.
No, that's true. That's true. He was helped. Similarly to Trump, his campaign was boosted in 2016, but he might be less obviously beholden. He's not financially beholden to Putin, I think, in the same way. Trump probably owes Putin-backed banks like $230 million or something.
Yes.
And I think Bernie likes being rich. I mean, he's a millionaire now. So he, instead of saying millionaires and billionaires, he just says billionaires because he is a millionaire. But yes, I will agree with you that he is less problematic than Trump.
And his campaign was helped along in 2016 by bots, Russian bots, and probably some American disinformation bots. But that was as a way to weaken Hillary Clinton. It wasn't because they wanted Bernie Sanders
to win. No. It was to diminish Hillary Clinton. It was to get Bernie Sanders voters so hyped up to vote for Bernie that they would then be so aggrieved that he lost the primary and so stuck in a fake bubble of, no, Bernie was so wonderful. We were in this bubble of talking about how Clinton was so terrible and rigging things and everything. So clearly it was a sham. And now we're either going to punitively vote for Trump to punish the DNC and the establishment. For them, they've been hyped up to take on the Democratic Party as an enemy.
Now this upcoming election, what they're going to do is to move to the other end of the party and try to create dissension within moderate voters and try to convince them that today's Democratic Party is too far to the left. And yeah, we hate Trump, but he's not as bad as the Democrats. So that's what they're going to do.
Yes.
They're already doing it. They've
Yes.
been doing it the whole time.
Yes, they haven't stopped. It's a good shtick. It's a successful, potent shtick, and they're sticking to it. It's how good can we marshal a response against it. And my idea for today is just trying to invite people to do research, not just into Fox advertisers, but the companies that offer products that compete with Fox advertisers. Fox advertising company competitors, to reward people for not advertising on Fox News. Because to me, that's a big prop for the kind of levels of fascism that's besetting America, is the people who only derive their news from Fox, when it's so effective at lying to people and so effective at framing all of the efforts that people are engaged in to bring justice back to America, to restore America, to reduce corruption. All of that's framed as deep state, and it's really frustrating. Somebody's recommending that I get a book that I've already got. I've got the book on tyranny. Sorry.
On tyranny, I've seen this.
Timothy Snyder, and he's just got little tips for how to collectively fight against fascism.
Yes, I've Rachel Maddow spoke about it because it came out right when Trump was elected, or where he was about to take office, I believe.
Yeah, I picked it up at the airport when I was flying into America. I visited the Statue of Liberty in 2018, and I was so emotional going there, just with what was happening. And I was quite afraid that there would be a war with Iran at some point. But my husband was going there for work, and I tagged along. And it was just really, really emotional visit. But I got to meet some resistors, and that was cool. I always love talking to resistors, because it's like, what are people doing on the ground? I'm cut off from all of that. I don't live in your country, but a lot of my emotional eggs are in that basket of going, I can't let America fall.
You should come over to the U.S. You should come over to the U.S. We can do a show and then go knock some doors for
that would be awesome.
Democrats.
Well, we probably are going to move to Boston within a year.
Wow.
So
okay.
So I was a little concerned. I talk about it sometimes, and it sort of fades in and out as a possibility. I was a bit worried because they look at your social media output when they're considering awarding visas. But my husband was fairly sure that white privilege would cushion our family, and that,
it usually takes care of things.
It does, yeah. I was a bit concerned. I didn't want to be responsible for sabotaging my husband's career, because I'm an activist, but at the same time, he knows activism is important to me, and he can always work somewhere else. But yes, particularly with the developments with Roger Stone and the prosecutors quitting and Bill Barr taking over all of the legal matters pertaining to Trump's dealings and Trump's interests, I was like, are we gonna just like move into an autocracy? Like what's going on with that? But yeah, I wonder how Boston will
continue to feel. Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
I was just gonna say I've continued to feel ever since the Women's March. I felt like I've been into politics really seriously since 2012. Ever since I first stepped into a campaign office randomly and I started doing it, I felt like obsessed in a good way. I mean, but that whole time I felt very alone in that this is something that I can sit around and I can wake up at 7, workout, watch MSNBC from 9 until 9 at night, 10 or 11 at night. Now there's so many people like yourself who are just so like, this is exciting. It's scary as hell, but it's exciting and it's cool and I care. And I think that that's really going to ramp up even more. And I don't think Trump's going to be able to withstand it. Yes, they're going to cheat. And yes, the Electoral College gives him an unfair advantage, but he still has to run for re-election. And his party's been getting their butts kicked since he got elected.
I guess in Virginia, working for a Democratic state senator in a legislature that's controlled now by Dems at House, Senate, and gubernatorial level. So,
Yes.
so that's cool. Paul, thanks. What? Thanks
I said thanks for.
Yeah. Someone's saying, Paul's saying he wouldn't move somewhere if white privilege was needed.
Everywhere. It's nice to have. I mean, it's not
the wheels everywhere, and it should be used for good. If you have more money than someone, if you have more privilege in any department, in any area of your life, then it's incumbent on you to use that privilege for good. I mean, there's lots of different privileges that operate in the world. So,
yeah, I mean, we all are more privileged than another. And looking how I look as an African American with a name like Matthew, and you know, having parents who went to college, I have advantages that other African Americans don't have. And so, to your point, it's, you know, we always got to use our advantages to try to level the playing field. Some people try to hoard all they can get. Yep. And that's just not how some minds work. And thank goodness for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not trying to abuse my privilege or hoard it. I hope
not
to
like
use
Roger.
Yeah. Not like Roger. Oh, Roger. Yeah.
Good old Roger Stone.
Good old Roger Stone. Oh my gosh. Do we think he's going to get a pardon? I heard Tucker Carlson was advocating for one, and he's often like Trump's focus group. You know, whatever Tucker Carlson tells Trump, Trump will be like, "Oh yeah, that's one of my trusted media advisors." So Tucker Carlson advocated against war for Iran, and a lot of people were saying, "Wow, Tucker Carlson saved lives." But we can commend him. You know, he might have just been passing on a message from Russia. I don't even know. I'm presuming Tucker Carlson is probably got some people who pass on messages to him about what to do that may not be strictly acting in America's interests.
It's really interesting to watch the Trump internal.
Oh, hang on, somebody's ringing my doorbell. I'm just going to be 1 second. I'll be right back. Keep telling them. Yeah, that would be great, Tony, because I'm in an interview.
No, you forget.
No, I didn't. I did.
I'm on the phone.
Okay, sorry. Hi, come here. Hello.
Hello. It's. I was saying that it's interesting how their little echo chamber works, because it funnels down even to little radio hosts. So a little radio host, like a guy that lives here in Virginia, his name is John Fredericks. They test out these different crazy ass ideas, and what they do is just they'll test out the scenarios, and they'll see what the callers say. If the callers call in like, no, this is too crazy. Like, I remember very specifically in the summer of 2017, when Trump, like we later find out in the Mueller report, is furious about Jeff Sessions not recusing, or he's.
Hi. Oh, Peter's on a call. Yes. Yes, please. Thank you so much. Sorry, Matt.
Oh, it's okay. No, like
they're
we
testing the
later
calls,
find
and
out,
caller says something, and they say it's too crazy.
Yeah, they say it's too crazy. Like, I remember a specific instance in mid-summer of 2017, which we later find out in the Mueller report that Trump is very angry at Jeff Sessions for recusing himself from the case. during that time, Trump was putting out tweets, and you can watch him in little snippets and interviews, and you can tell he's thinking about firing Jeff Sessions as Attorney General.
Yeah.
And he had his radio hosts all tested out. And down in Alabama, if you're in the know, you found out that the people down there were furious. And these are Trump supporters, people who love Donald Trump, wear the shirts. He always gets himself, all he does. That's his sounding board. And he will go just to the edge of what those people will allow on his little radio shows and TV shows. Like if Tucker gets too much pushback, then he knows that he can't do that.
That must save them so much money in focus groups that he's just got Tucker and the white ring host to just test out what gets pushed back. So do the thing, see how much in incremental steps, see how much pushback it gets, and then don't do it more if it's outraging even his red hats.
Yep.
Red hat gang.
It doesn't matter what the majority of American people think. He just wants to keep his people happy. Yeah. And that's a bad bet. It's a bad bet.
It's a bad bet in a functional democracy, but I still have some concerns. I have some concerns about you have to. So I have heard that advocating at state levels for electoral protections can be one way for Americans to get around the fact that the GOP keep blocking bills. I heard they blocked 3 bills yesterday for electoral security measures. That must be so frustrating for Democrats to keep churning out bills that pass the House for election security to protect the integrity of the American electoral system. And Mitch McConnell still feels secure enough in his position of being propped up by Fox News to just keep blocking bills, knowing that it won't get reported on accurately, people won't understand the degree to which he's sabotaging democracy, and that too many Americans are bought into a dysfunctional democracy. They're like, yeah, Republicans can cheat and we don't care. They're cheating for us.
Yep. But again, like I said on the last time I was on, it's frustrating, but it's at the same time it's an opportunity.
Yeah.
They think that no one's watching. I don't know why they think that, but we're going to make them pay. They wouldn't be cheating if it was already rigged for them. If they were secure that they were going to win.
Yeah.
Only Richard Nixon does that.
Does what?
So Nixon was going to win the 72 election, the Watergate thing. He was going to win that handily. He didn't have to cheat. The whole Watergate thing was completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
But he was a narcissist and a crazy man. So he needed to put his thumb on the scale even more. And he ended up with the biggest electoral college victory ever, but then was found out later to have been implicated in this whole robbery.
Yes. Yes. So he was returned for a second term.
Yes.
Watergate wasn't necessary. What were they going to get from Watergate? Just get what the Democratic Party was doing, or what their...
Essentially a watered down version of what the Russians got from us when they hacked us. They got our field strategy, our fundraising numbers, where we thought we were best. So it was a 1970.
Oh, and where your weaknesses were as well. Oh my gosh, I didn't think about that before. I just thought about getting emails, but they got your strategies and your weaknesses.
Yes. And passed them on to the Trump campaign.
Yeah.
Through Roger Stone. Good old Roger.
My God, nobody talks about, well, I haven't heard it talked about that much. I guess that doesn't mean that
and
it's...
that's why we should have impeached him for it, so the country would have known what was going on.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll try and do my bit to keep talking about that then. The fact that whatever Nixon got from that Watergate theft is also what Trump got via the Russians and via WikiLeaks. Is Democratic strategy and Democratic points of weakness. I knew that Manafort passed on, or Manafort and Rick Gates passed on GOP polling data to Konstantin Kilimnik, to the Russians. But they didn't have to pass on Dem strategy because the Russians already had that.
Yes.
And passed it back. So it's like that would have been a transaction of, here's the GOP polling numbers so you can help enhance them in the battleground states. And reverse directionally, Russians giving Trump campaign, here's the Dem weaknesses, here's the states where there's the biggest groundswell potentially of Trump supporters or Trump-leaning people from the Democratic data.
Yep.
Wow.
And then they Manafort, the Russians, their knowledge of American politics wasn't as broad as we would have guessed. They didn't even understand the concept of swing states. Manafort told them what swing states were and told them to target Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and
Michigan. Minnesota. Oh, I can do this. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Minnesota. Is that the four? Yes.
Well, Minnesota is he came close in 16, but he's not going to come close again there. So, yeah, it's frustrating that this whole thing is going to have happened in 30 years, and the Ukraine thing, which was crazy and unbelievable, is going to be the main thing that was talked about. But the fact that the president of the United States helped a cyber attack against the American people, covered it up, and is about to pardon the lead guy on the case. Yeah, it's going to be an afterthought. Just like
maybe we can try and talk about it more now, not just talk about, hey, it's so unfair that Roger Stone's getting pardoned, but specifically talk about what Roger Stone did.
Yes.
I hope we can resuscitate that conversation. Sounds like it needs resuscitating.
Yeah. But I've got about 5 more minutes, if you can.
Yeah, I should go 5. I can do 5 more minutes.
Okay.
Yes. And I missed a call, but that's okay. I hope it wasn't my children's school. That should be in my phone more as a number that just that's all right. They would have called again. They would have called again if it was like an urgent thing, probably.
Oh, man.
It's hard to be a mom and to go, I'm like the buck stops here. If somebody needs to call, they can call my husband as well. So there's that. But that's just your feeling, like you miss a call and you're like, what if that was the school? What if one of my children fell over and has a fractured something? But yeah, they're definitely called twice for a fracture. Definitely called twice. I've only got 1 missed call. You don't have kids yet, do you?
No,
you're not.
No,
that's so reproductively biased of me. You don't have to have children.
Oh, reproductively biased. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, I just made it up right there.
I guess it's fair. But yeah, so was there anything that you wanted to go over in the last couple minutes here?
Let's see. We've talked about Roger Stone and dug up more important stuff than I even thought, that highlighted to me that, yes, it's not just that he helped protect Trump and the pattern of collusion, but that the collusion actively involved Trump's campaign getting the equivalent of what Richard Nixon's burglars stole from the Watergate Hotel. The Democratic strategy, your fundraising strengths and your fundraising weaknesses. So areas to most effectively target in the attack on American electoral integrity.
The Mueller report says, and this isn't, this guy's ideas of what happened. They found evidence and got it down to the nuts and bolts of it. The Russians embedded themselves in the DNC computer system, sat there for months and watched the keystrokes of people working on their computers.
Wow. I'm
going
to wave to someone. Hi, Craig.
The Mueller report. Sorry, but nobody was going to read the Mueller report. It was important and those just hearings that were just hearings. They weren't going to do it. People needed to be really told. But 2020 hindsight.
I was waiting for people to read it for me, which was inexcusably lazy, but I did try. I downloaded it and was reading some of it, and the legalistic language of it was quite a turnoff. Like the length of the sentences, and I'd be trying to plow through it. And I think also mediated through my disappointment that Barr was able to switch people off in any case and say, know the conclusions of it are all exonerate Trump. My disappointment in knowing that regardless of whether or not I read it, that people were just too ready to believe a corrupt attorney general who was going to say, I've read it for you. It says everything's fine. I remember wallowing at that point. I had so many emotions in that basket leading up to the Mueller report that Trump would be exposed. And to have somebody step in front of it and say, nothing to see here, it's all fine, was really crushing. And I should have worked harder to move through that. And Cherie Jacobus or whatever, she funds people to read out loud, celebrities to read the Mueller report, and for that to be broadcast on Fox News ads. I just think, yes, thank you. You're sorry?
I'll make a move first.
You're going to go?
Yeah, I'm gonna go. Yeah.
Okay.
So is everything okay in the bathroom service? Iranian is okay. It's
Yeah.
okay.
We're going to hire somebody with a thermal camera to check for mold because it feels like it might be fine for a few minutes, but at nighttime we can tell that there's just mold. I'm asthmatic and it makes my breathing worse. So we'll get somebody to come in with a thermal camera to check for mold and then maybe send you the photos. We just think it's really necessary because the breathing, the air quality is impacted. We can tell.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Just anyway, we just I'll keep in touch.
Keep in touch. Yeah. Thank you. So hello. I better go. Rather than make you listen to my conversations. But we will hope to talk to you again. It's so
Yes.
enjoyable.
Absolutely. And we'll dig up some more things for people to think about.
Yes, and I'll go back and read the Mueller report. You know what? It's not too late. Maybe I can even audiobook. Read and go to the gym. I can do that.
There you
Work
go.
off all the anxiety, totalitarian poundage, and gather my familiarity with the outcomes that he reported on. Because I've seen extracts that say, yep, Jill Stein and Bernie Sanders had their campaign boosted by bots to just boost the divisive impact of saying the establishment Democratic Party is the enemy and need to be punished by voting against them.
And everybody was operating. The last thing I'll say, and then we can end it, and we'll do this again another time, like I said. But everybody was operating under the assumption that the worst case scenario was that Donald Trump really wasn't going to win. There was no chance that he was going to win, 0% chance he was going to win. So all those people were going to protest vote and still hope that Hillary Clinton was the president.
Yes.
But I didn't have to actively do anything to make her the president. She's just going to win a small victory as our punishment for her being a sellout, her doing X.
Yes. They weren't necessarily voting in the thought that they were enabling a Trump victory. They were voting to reduce the size of Hillary Clinton's victory because that's what they assumed would happen. Because they weren't oppressed by massive fear and anxiety like me and other people who heard Trump's rhetoric in the 2016 campaign and went, holy shit, that sounds like Hitler. That sounds like early. Yeah.
Yep.
So,
all right. Well, thanks so much for having me again.
Thanks for joining, Matt. I love it. People, if you don't already follow @Politidope, make sure you do. You probably already do. And talk to you again soon,
Thank you,
Matt.
guys. Thank you. Have a great night.
You too.